High-risk AI is weaving itself into everything, from our healthcare systems to our power grids. So that brings up a really big question. What's the plan for accountability when one of these incredibly powerful systems fails? Let's take a look at how the EU is tackling this head-on. And it's a huge question, right? I mean, we're not talking about your favorite app crashing for an hour. When these systems are deeply integrated into our daily lives, a failure, well, the impact can be massive. And it's not some far-off theoretical idea. The consequences can be very real. So picture this for a second. You've got an AI that's supposed to be managing a city's power grid. But then, during a massive heat wave, it messes up, a miscalculation, and boom, a cascading failure leads to a city-wide blackout. This is way more than just an inconvenience. Think about it. Hospitals, emergency services, the whole economy, it all grinds to a halt. This is exactly what's at stake. Okay, so facing these kinds of high-stakes scenarios, what's the plan? Well, the European Union actually has an answer for this. It's a key piece of their landmark AI Act, and it's called Article 73. And what it does is create this mandatory system for reporting serious incidents. This way, when things do go wrong, there's a clear, defined path to figure out what happened and who's responsible. Okay, so let's get into the details. What exactly is a serious incident? The law is super specific here, and it all boils down to one key thing: the link between the AI system and the actual harm that was caused. So here's where it gets really specific. For an incident to be reportable, there has to be what the law calls a causal link, or at least a reasonable likelihood of one, between the AI and the harm. This is really important. It means you can't just blame the AI for anything that happens nearby. You have to show a real, credible connection. And once that link is there, the AI Act breaks down the type of harm into four main categories. First up, and maybe the most obvious one, is physical harm. This is pretty straightforward. We're talking about situations where an AI's failure directly leads to someone's death or a serious injury. Think about, say, an AI diagnostic tool in a hospital that gets a scan wrong, and that mistake leads to a fatal delay in treatment. That's a classic example. Or maybe a self-driving car whose sensors fail and it doesn't see an obstacle on the road. These are the kinds of direct physical harms we're talking about here. All right, next up is material harm. So here, we're moving beyond harm to people and looking at major damage to property or even the environment. Remember that citywide blackout we talked about? Yep, this is where it fits in perfectly. But it could also be something like an AI managing a city's water supply that goes haywire, or a logistics AI that just brings a whole transportation network to its knees. Now, this third category, this is where we really get into the big ethical questions. We're talking about violations of fundamental rights, and this hits on one of the most talked about dangers of AI: algorithmic bias. So let's say a company uses an AI to sort through resumes, but that AI is systematically tossing out qualified candidates because of their gender or ethnicity. Under the Act, that is absolutely a reportable incident. Same thing for an AI surveillance system that crosses the line and violates privacy laws. And that brings us to the fourth and final category: societal harm. You can think of this one as a bit of a catch-all for those really big, systemic impacts that threaten society itself. Probably the most powerful example here would be an AI that's used to generate and spread convincing deepfake disinformation to try and influence an election. This is all about protecting the very foundations of our society, our democratic processes, public safety, from these kinds of large-scale threats. Okay, so once an incident is identified as serious, the clock starts ticking, and it starts fast. The AI Act lays out some really strict deadlines for reporting, and the timeline changes depending on just how severe the harm was. What's so smart about this timeline is that it's tiered. It's not one size fits all. The bigger and more urgent the crisis, the less time you have to report it. So for a massive problem like that critical infrastructure failure we talked about, the provider has just 2 days. That's it. If a person's death is involved, the deadline is 10 days. And for everything else that falls under serious incident, it's 15 days. You can see how the whole system is designed to force the most critical failures to the top of the pile for regulators. Now, obviously, the lawmakers who wrote this were realistic. They knew you can't do a full deep dive investigation in just 2 days. So they built some practical flexibility right into the rule. You can submit an initial report, even if it's incomplete, just to meet that deadline. The key is to get the incident on the regulator's radar immediately. Then, after you've done the full investigation, a complete, detailed report has to follow without delay. So, filing the report, that's really just the first step. It kicks off this whole formal process that brings in a few different players, and each one has a very specific job to do.
What this does is create a clear chain of accountability to make sure the incident is actually investigated and resolved.
And what's so important to understand is that accountability is shared. It's not all on one company. First, you have the provider. That's the company that actually built the AI system. Their job is to investigate what went wrong, get to the root cause, and then fix it. Then there's the deployer. This is the organization that's actually using the AI in the real world. If they're the ones who notice the problem, they're responsible for starting that reporting clock, and they have to cooperate with the investigation. And then overseeing the whole process, you have the National Market Surveillance Authority, or MSA. They're kind of like the referee. They get the report, and they coordinate the official response.
So, what does that investigation actually look like? Well, it's a very structured three-step process. The provider can't just file the report and say, okay, we're done. No, they are legally required to do a full root cause analysis to figure out why the failure happened. Then, based on what they find, they have to do a brand new risk assessment to figure out, could this happen again? And finally, they have to come up with and actually implement a concrete plan to fix the problem and make sure it never happens again. Now, I know this can sound like a lot of bureaucracy and red tape, right? But Article 73 is so much more than that. It's really a foundational piece of the entire AI Act. It's not just about filling out forms. It's about building a real foundation of trust and safety for these incredibly powerful systems. And when you step back and look at the goals here, you really start to see the bigger picture. At its core, this whole framework is designed to protect public safety and our fundamental rights from the potential harms of AI. It draws clear lines of accountability, so there's no question about who's responsible. And this is key. All the data from these reports helps regulators see patterns, monitor risks across the whole industry, and hopefully prevent future disasters before they happen. It's about creating a culture of safety.
There's a quote in the analysis that I think just perfectly captures the spirit of this law. It really shows that the AI Act gets that a failure isn't just about bad code or a broken sensor. The very same event can be a technical glitch and a serious violation of human rights, like the right to privacy or the right not to be discriminated against. And this whole reporting framework is built to tackle both of those dimensions at the same time.
So in the end, Article 73 isn't just a set of rules. It's really the EU's attempt to answer one of the biggest questions we face today. As we continue to let AI manage more and more of our world, the real challenge isn't just about passing laws. It's about a much deeper question. How do we build accountability right into the code, into the culture, into the very DNA of how we design and deploy these incredible technologies?